Hey Rip City, this is Danny Avdia, and you're listening to The Briefcase with Casey Holdahl.
Greetings, Blizzard fans, and welcome to The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Episode 155 of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. I am Casey Holdahl. Took a couple weeks break off to celebrate the end of the season. Actually, I just had some vacation time I had to use, so decided to use it. But we're back. Portland Trail Blazers pre-draft workouts are starting to heat up at the facility in Tualatin. They've had a number of workouts already, but the talent of the players coming through Tualatin now starting to tick up as we are basically a little less than a month out from the 2025 NBA draft. Trailblazers with the 11th overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft, the only pick they have right now. Even though it's a little bit of old news now, but since I wasn't around, all NBA defense for Toumani Camara and all rookie for Donovan Clingan. Congratulations to both of those guys. We'll just talk about that really fast and do a quick preview of the 2025 NBA Finals. For the 7th season, there will be a different team winning the NBA Finals. That is a good thing for the NBA, in my personal opinion, and obviously here in a smaller market in Portland. Always nice to see teams in smaller markets like Oklahoma City and Indianapolis get a chance to play for the chip. We'll talk about all that and a little bit more on this edition of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Well, on Tuesday, the Trailblazers held their third pre-draft workout. Most of those players, at least currently not expected to be drafted, are getting drafted late in the second round. Zach Hicks out of Penn State, Chris Mannion out of Vanderbilt, Wade Taylor IV out of Texas A&M, Caleb Love out of Arizona, Zach Austin out of Pittsburgh, and Money Williams, great name Money, out of Montana. That was a Tuesday workout, and that was kind of similar to the two previous workouts they had before, where guys who I think are kind of testing the waters, guys. Actually, they have quite a few players who came in for early workouts who have since decided to go back to college now, which, as I'm going to talk about here in a moment, it makes it a little bit kind of tough to figure out kind of what to make of some of these mock drafts, because a lot of those players have since decided to go back to college. So I don't really know if there's a whole lot of consensus really about kind of who the best players are after you get out of maybe the top 10, but we'll talk about a little bit more of that later. So that was kind of the way that the workouts had been running, or at least the caliber of players that have been coming in for workouts. But on Thursday, that changed considerably with a workout featuring almost all first-round guys, all guys expected to be drafted, if nothing else. Asa Newell out of Georgia, who the ESPN has him at 21 in their current mock draft. Jace Richardson out of Michigan State, 16th in the most recent ESPN mock draft. Liam McNeely out of UConn, 18th in the most recent mock draft. Hanson Yang out of the Quidong Eagles, 41st. I imagine that he's probably going to move up as this time goes on. But if not, definitely guaranteed to get drafted. If not, late in the first round, late in or early in the second round, I would imagine. Rasheer Fleming out of St. John's, the 27th guy in the ESPN's most recent mock draft, and Will Riley out of Illinois, 22 in ESPN's most recent mock draft. So after having a number of workouts where at least the mock drafts, and I'm not saying the mock drafts are the end all be all. In fact, I'll just say it right now. They're not the end all be all. Those things are wrong all the time. But, you know, for someone like myself who doesn't follow college basketball super closely, about the best way to get at least a feel for what the opinions of some of these players are is by looking at those mock drafts. And the first three workouts, not a whole lot of guys in those workouts showing up in those mock drafts. Again, doesn't mean they wouldn't get drafted, but that's just where they're at right now at this stage in the process. Once again, not the case on Thursday's workout. All first-round guys or first-round or early second-round guys. And again, too, with Hanson, now that other guys have dropped out, I wouldn't be surprised if the most recent mock drafts maybe have him somewhere towards the end of the first round. But either way, a lot more talent in that workout, or at least, again, in terms of kind of what the projections are at this point in time. And I think we're probably going to start to see that a little bit here. Now, you know, when I ran off kind of the players and where they're at in the mock drafts, as I mentioned, Ace Newell, 21, 16, 18, 41, 27, 22. You know, you might be thinking to yourself right now, but the Blazers have the 11th overall pick. Why would they be bringing in players, you know, that are kind of projected to go in those ranges? And, you know, I'll give you a few opinions about why that might be. First off, as I kind of just mentioned there, a lot of those mock drafts might be wrong, particularly, you know, once you get out of like the top 10, you know, the consensus about who kind of the best players are at that point in time, it starts to get a little bit fuzzy. And so, you know, particularly at this point in the process, I don't even know if there's a whole lot of intel out there about who teams like. I think a lot of those mock drafts are really more kind of looking at maybe what a team needs and maybe trying to apply that to who they might draft in that range. And, you know, there's there's something to be said about that, but I don't know that those things are necessarily based on actual intel, more just kind of assumptions about maybe what a team might do or what they've done historically in the past. So that's part of it. So one, it just might be that those mock drafts are incorrect, and particularly again at this stage in the process, workouts are just getting going. In fact, all the guys who are in for Thursday's workout, even though they're all expected to go get drafted and be in the first round, all those guys had said at best that was their second workout, and for a number of guys, it was their first workout. So we're still very early in the process. So particularly for guys who have a chance to move up, teams want to see kind of players do things specifically, and if they're able to do those things in workouts, if they have good workouts in your gym, that's why you have that workout process, is because you want to move up in the eyes of the teams that are going to be selecting. So, part of it is we're just at a point in the process where there's not a lot of intel. We're in a point in the process where guys are starting to probably get in front of some more NBA decision makers after having some time to go through workouts. A lot of these guys basically spending time at their agents' facilities and working out there and getting better and kind of honing those skills that maybe they didn't get to do in the NCAA or internationally. And so maybe those players are kind of, starting to make progress, and teams are seeing that, and that's kind of changing some of those draft boards. So that's a possibility as well. One of the things too, another thing, a lot of players, as I mentioned, going back to school, guys who, there's been more talk this year about guys who in previous drafts probably would have went into the draft. I mean, we got guys who were projected to go kind of mid first round who are deciding to go back to school now. And the big reason for that is obviously NIL. There's obviously a lot of money now for players to come back to their schools or to basically test the waters and go to different schools. We've seen a number of players do that as well. And so part of it is that we're seeing, particularly this year, that players who would have otherwise gone into the draft are deciding to go back to school. And, that changes those boards all the time. So if there was a guy you liked, who's now saying he's going back to school, you might still like that guy, but it doesn't matter. He's not going to be draft eligible. So that changes the board as well. So guys, so for example, Jace Richardson at 16 out of Michigan State, son of Jason Richardson, and has known Chauncey Billups since he was 5 years old, we learned. He's a guy who he's at 16 right now in some mock drafts, but if there's two or three guys decide to go back to school, that bumps you up a couple spots. So it's potential that, if a guy's at 16, is 11 really all that far away from 16? No, it's not. So, that might be a situation where, as more players are going back to school, there's a lot of changes in those mock drafts. Another thing too, just about guys going back to school, is that it seems a little odd to me too, that we went from like, once you hire an agent, that was it. You have to clear for the draft. If you don't get drafted, you can't go back to school. To, well, you can hire an agent, but you don't have to necessarily. If you don't like what you hear, you can come back, but you have to come back by kind of an early date. Now, I think the deadline to withdraw is June 15th, which is just 10 days before the draft. So you could potentially be a team that likes a player, is maybe not set on drafting that player, but is like, hey, he's definitely on our board. And then that player goes back, 10 days before the actual event happens. So, I imagine the kind of first round guys, that probably won't be the case. But who knows? I mean, maybe, your donors get together, drop a big NIL deal on the guy, and he decides to go back to school. I mean, which, I think is probably a good thing for the NBA and the quality of the play as well, is to, kind of have guys stay in school for a little bit longer. I think that, and particularly for guys who, if it used to be like if you were like 21 or 22 and you're going to the draft, it's like everyone wants a 19 or an 18 or a 19 or a 20-year-old because they want that kind of long runway for your career. And so those guys, even though they're better players, they wouldn't necessarily get an opportunity to maybe get drafted as high because, teams are just maybe scared off a little bit by, the age. And I think we're seeing now, though, particularly with kind of the way the finals are playing out, with how important role players are now in the CBA, that, some of those guys probably made a better chance of getting drafted now in the NBA than they had maybe 4 or 5 years ago, because teams aren't as afraid of guys who are just a little bit older in the process. Another reason why the Blazers might be bringing in players who are kind of in that general range, the more kind of the late teens, early late 20s, is, there's always potential that they trade, that they either make a trade to get another pick They make a trade with the 11 to move down. That's always a possibility. They're just trying to be prepared if an opportunity arises to where they can make a trade where there's players in that range. So the possibility of a transaction is obviously there as well, and so that might be a reason why they've brought in those players. I think that's probably the least likely scenario. Not to say that they wouldn't execute a trade, they absolutely would. But if I'm kind of grading like what I think the most likely reason why they're bringing in players kind of in that range or why they did at least once, it's probably more because of it's just a little hard to get guys in at 11, which would be my fourth reason, than the Blazers necessarily trading down, which again, very, very possible that that happens. Or again, maybe they make a move and they get another first round pick while also having their own first round pick. So they get multiple first round picks. In that situation, you obviously want to be very well prepared to select someone that you feel very confident about. And so you maybe kind of cast a little bit of a wider net than you would otherwise if you were just dead set on using your one pick that the Blazers have in this draft, which is 11. But more than anything, I think it's really more about you got to get in guys who are willing to come in. And at 11, you have guys who, if you feel like you're a top 10 guy, do you really want to work out for a team that's 11? Because then that maybe sets the impression that, you're going to go that far back. So I think that's kind of part of it. And then I think you also have the guys who are maybe like who are projected to go from maybe like 10 to 18, 19. They all feel like they could probably move up into the top 10. So they necessarily wouldn't want to work out for a team that's at 11. So I think kind of in the 20s is where it's kind of the sweet spot in terms of players who are excited and willing to come work out for you. And, I don't know how, workouts throughout the years too have changed. And a lot of guys are doing one-on-one workouts. At 11, it's nice because 11 is about where guys don't necessarily have the ability to come in and say, I just want to work out, do a solo workout. And maybe that's, again, why you wouldn't necessarily get in all the players you might want to see at 11. Another thing to remember, too, is that we still are fairly early in the pre-draft process. Obviously, the June just begun. We're still, again, the first round is on the 25th, so you got almost a month. So it also, I think, too, like, once the workouts start, and maybe players and their agents start to realize where it is, maybe starts to crystallize a little bit kind of where they're at that point in time. I think that's probably where it's maybe a little bit easier to schedule workouts in your own gym, because at that point maybe players are realizing like, yeah, I thought maybe I was like 5, 6, 7, maybe I'm more like 9, 10, 11. So that's always a possibility as well. And another thing too is that, like, as I mentioned, a lot of agents now kind of hold their own workouts. Executives just go to one place and see a couple workouts. They'll probably have one of those in Los Angeles. I think maybe there's a couple of those in Houston as well. I'm sure maybe one or two on the East Coast. And that's a great way to obviously see players as well. So, as the years have gone on, I think kind of in-house workouts have probably become a little less important, but still a valuable piece of your pre-draft evaluation. Always nice again to kind of talk to a guy in your gym, kind of be around your players, and there have been a number of players at those workouts, current players that is. So that there's some value to that, and there always will be. But how much value? I think it is to be debated, but either way, the Trailblazers, as I mentioned on one of our more recent shows as well, too, still a team that's actually doing pre-draft workouts publicly. Some teams just don't basically say who they're bringing in anymore. Some teams don't have any immediate availabilities for those players, and that is defined by their agents. Like if a guy doesn't want to do media and got to do media, and that's kind of the end all be all of it. But for the most part, we've had guys who have been willing to come in and kind of talk about their experience, which I think is great because also too, like, you're gonna have to do that in the NBA. Like, and I think part of it, and guys know this now, that when you're doing the media portion of your workout, like that's teams are watching that too. Like they want to kind of see how you conduct yourselves in those situations, how you kind of present yourself. And that's not going to be the reason why a team does or doesn't draft a guy. But it's part of your intel. It tells you something about the player, something about the way they view themselves, and maybe kind of how they might fit on your team, and just the way that they present themselves to the world, which is an important thing to know when you're making such it's it is a rather first round picks make a lot of money. So that's an investment for a team. And when you're investing those kind of resources into a young player, a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old, anything you can know about that player or that person, and I should call him it's not player, it's the person, is going to be useful. So that's where the Blazers are at in the process now. I would expect that they will have more workouts this week and more workouts going forward as we get closer to the first round. Well, the summer is almost here. The weather is turning. It's a beautiful day outside. We've had a couple of great days here in Oregon. It seems like the rain is just about done, which is a good reason to get out on vacation. Head out to Oregon coast, and on your way to the coast, check out Spearmint Casino, which features hundreds of state-of-the-art slot games, including brand new games like Phoenix Link. Whether you're into traditional slots or progressive jackpots, Spearmint Casino is here to elevate your game. Spearmint Casino, Highway 18 in Grand Ronde, elevate your game. Well, as I mentioned, it was a little bit of old news now, but unfortunately, they didn't tell me what the schedule was going to be of announcing these things, or at least if they did, I forgot. They actually probably did tell me the schedule. That's probably my bad. But either way, great to hear about Donovan Clingan getting second team all rookie and Toumani Camara getting second team all defense. Congratulations to those guys. We talked about that for so long and for so many times on this show that I felt like it couldn't just pass without me saying something about it. Shout out to Donovan. Shout out to Toumani. Shout out to the staffs on the excellent job they did promoting both those players for those awards. Toumani especially. Super shout out to Trailblazers PR and to our video and to our digital staff as well, particularly the social media folks. Toumani, obviously 99.9% of the credit goes to Toumani Camara and the work that he's put in. 0.1% goes to those folks who put that campaign together, because you got to work to kind of get a guy like Toumani an award like that. Toumani obviously earned it, but shout out to the folks who work for the team outside of the actual court, busting their butts to make sure that those guys are getting the credit they deserved. If they had not, I don't think Toumani ends up getting that award that he very much deserved. So shout out to those guys as well. So as I mentioned, Donovan Clingan, second team all rookie. Read to the press release here. Clingan is the first Trailblazer to earn all rookie team honor since Damian Lillard in 2012, 2013. And that's actually something I wanted to mention here too. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it here, even though it's a little bit old now, is that the Blazers have not generally had players that have won these awards lately, so it's been over a decade since the Trailblazers had a player who was on an all rookie team, which for a team like the Trailblazers that has had some pretty good rookies, it's a little surprising, I would say. And so shout out to Donovan for that. The number 7th pick in the 2024 NBA draft, Clingan appeared in 67 games, 37 starts during his first NBA season, averaging 6.5 points, 7.9 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks in 19.8 minutes per game on 54% shooting from the field. A starter in his final 27 games of the season, Clingan closed out on the defensive end of the floor for a rookie, or excuse me, Clingan stood out, as he absolutely did. As I've mentioned time and time again, I think Clingan was one of the best defensive rookies this year. I think in the paint, the best defensive rookie this year. I've seen some kind of chatter on Twitter talking about that as well. I fully agree with it. If nothing else, Donovan should have been on the rookie team just because he actually plays great defense, which is something we should be supporting these days. Stood out on the defensive end. Among qualifying players, Clingan led the entire NBA in contested shots per 36 minutes at 17.6. So 17.6 shots contested per 36 minutes this season for Donovan Clingan. That is a lot of contesting. And fifth in blocked shots per game at 1.6 per game. On the offensive glass, the Bristol, Connecticut native led the entire league in offensive rebound per 36 minutes at 5.9 rebounds per 36 minutes, minimum of 1,000 minutes. By the way, too, bring back qualifications on stat websites. So it's always been that you have to play a certain number of games, have a certain number of possessions, play a certain number of minutes in order to be qualified for statistical rankings. A lot of sites don't do that anymore, including the NBA's stat website, which is a real problem when you're trying to kind of parse out some of these things about who's done what. Having to filter through all this garbage of guys who played 3 games and shot 95% from 3 because they made one. Well, I'm going to screw up that math, but either way, guys who played 1 or 2 games, mucking up all of the rankings. Bring back qualified players. have it as a filter on your site. It is, I think ESPN is the only place that still has qualified players in their stat rankings. Everyone else just throws all the stats, just raw numbers in, and just makes you figure out who actually are we talking about in these situations. So that's my little rant there. Bring back qualifications for stats. If you only play 5 games, you're not qualified to finish some so and so in the stats rankings. Get them out. There we go. All right. Getting back to Donovan Clingan, who did qualify for many awards, including All NBA Rookie. Among qualifying rookies, again, qualifying. Qualifying is important, folks. Games are important. You have to just pop it in and out. You don't get to be in these stat things, so stop putting these people in those tables. Get it out. Among qualifying rookies during the 2024-25 season, Clingan ranked first in blocks per game at 1.6 and third in rebounds per game at 7.9, while ranking fourth in field goal percentage at 54% among players who attempted at least 200 field goals. Clingan grabbed 527 total rebounds and 217 offensive rebounds during his rookie campaign, both marks the most by a rookie in team history. Shout out to you, Donovan Clingan. Great rookie season. Great things to come for Donovan Clingan. So a long way to go for Donovan, but already showing himself to be a great player, particularly on the defensive end, a mountain of a man who's only going to get bigger. And once Donovan kind of figures out what it takes to be in kind of NBA shape consistently, sky's the limit for the young man. If he can stay healthy, Donovan's super coachable, a guy who wants to be great, has been out in the water a little bit too. I saw he was at Trillium Lake the other day. They did a great little piece with him and Justin Minaya out fishing, which I thought was awesome. Shout out to the video staff for that one as well. Really happy with what we've seen out of Donovan Clingan. I know the team is excited about his future as well. And a guy who, again, like if the Blazers want to become a top flight defensive team, which they've talked about becoming, drafting a guy like Donovan Clingan is what gets you there. Another thing that gets you there is the play of Toumani Camara, who has been absolutely phenomenal in getting NBA second team all defense, which has been even longer since we had a player make an all defensive team, as you will find out just in the moment, which you already know too. But again, Toumani put in so much great work and worked so hard, and people really wanted to see him get honored for, the work that he put in on the defensive end in just his second season. That I felt like it was important that we give Toumani his flowers because he was fantastic. So reading the press release, Camara is the first Trailblazer to earn all defensive team honors since Theo Ratliff in 2023-24. That predates my time with the team, which not a whole lot of things these days are the first time since before I started working for the team, something happened. So really goes to show, one, how hard it is to make those all defensive teams, and two, just how long it's been since the Trailblazers had a player who, at least in terms of the eyes of the entire NBA, is one of the 10 best defensive players in the NBA. Toumani Camara already getting that honor in the second season, and much deserved. And it's just the 15th selection in NBA history. So Toumani Camara, just the 15th player in franchise history to be named to an all-defensive team. That is very rare company. Shout out to you, Toumani. Competing in just the second NBA season in 2024-25, Camara established himself as one of the premier defenders, during his sophomore campaign, leading the entire league in offensive fouls drawn at 90 and charges drawn at 31, while ranking second in total defensive stops with 257. Camara's 31 charges drawn over the course of the season were 9 more than the next closest player and a higher output than 21 teams' season-long total of charges drawn, which those are always the stats for me that I just love. Toumani Camara had more charges this year than 21 teams total. That's great. That's the kind of stuff. Let's get a kick out of that. His 90 offensive fouls drawn were 34 more than any other player as well. Those are the kind of fouls that annoy you when you get them called. But being a great defensive player, I think a lot of what being a great defensive player is being annoying. Like it's just kind of comes with the territory. So Toumani Camara, despite being a great young man, also gets under the skin a little bit, which is why he is such a great defender, or at least helps him be a great defender. Named February's Western Conference Defensive Player of the Month, Camara totaled 116 steals, 277 defensive rebounds, and 50 blocks during the 2024-25 campaign. One of only 4 players in the NBA to reach those marks over the course of the season, and the first Trailblazer to do so since Cliff Robinson, one of my all-time favorite Trailblazers, RIP Uncle Cliffy, in 1993-94. Camara's 116 steals finished the season ranked 9th in the NBA, while his 62 games with at least 1 steal were tied for 4th most. Congratulations, Toumani. Getting honored on the all defensive team is it's more difficult than making the all-star team. It's a different, it's kind of gauging it's something different. But all-star teams, that's what, 24 players that make the all-star team every year, 12 on each side. There are only 10 players that make all NBA defense. So it is twice as hard to get onto an all defensive team than it is to be named an all-star. That's just what the numbers say. So the fact that Toumani has been able to do that in his second season is, I think it really shows great things for Toumani. It really changes, I think, the trajectory of the Trailblazers and what they can do kind of going forward. And it really, along with guys like Donovan, along with guys like Denny, along with guys like Scoot, along with Shaden, Ant. I think they're kind of starting to see the team take shape a little bit. The roster is kind of starting to get to a point where I think they feel comfortable with kind of taking that next step forward. And I would imagine that the next season, depending on, if they're able to make any trades, what they do with the 11th overall pick, you know, I I would fully expect the Trailblazers next season will be entering the year looking at being competitive. And I mean, they were this year too. I think they were still a ways away from that. But I think, with the way that the season ended for the Trailblazers, I think they go into the 2025-26 season. And obviously, dependent on kind of some of the personnel moves they make this offseason. But I think it's very reasonable to assume that the team is going to be coming into next season feeling like, getting into the playoffs is a reachable goal. Now, will they get there? The West is tough and is only getting tougher. The East was god awful this year, and I imagine it'll be better next year, but it's still not anywhere close to the West. We'll see. Yeah, it's difficult to make the playoffs in the West every year. I mean, the Warriors were a team that people thought might have been able to make it to the Western Conference Finals. If Steph Curry doesn't get injured, maybe they do. Well, maybe they do. That's a possibility. But that was a team that was on the play-in. So, like it is, it's tough sledding out West, and you have to be on top of it for all 82 games in order to put yourself in a good spot there. But the Blazers roster getting to a spot with all defensive guys like Toumani Camara, all rookie team guys like Donovan Clingan, and the veteran players that they already have that are kind of taking the next step that we saw this year. I think, you go into next season feeling really confident about your ability to compete, whether that gets you into the postseason to be determined, but I think you feel really confident again about your chances of being a competitive team. Obviously, another thing that happened while I was away, Trailblazers officially put up for sale. The team is going to be sold. They have employed a law firm to kind of vet the bids. That's about all any of us know about it. There seems to be an assumption that the sale will go into the season and potentially into next seasons. We'll see how that goes. I don't really have anything else to report other than that. We've all known since Paul Allen passed that eventually the team would be sold. And now the state has decided to take that step. So whenever there's any news to pass along, I will obviously pass it along to you. I do not have any news. I think even the speculation right now about kind of what the potential offers and really not even the offers as much as kind of what the groups might be. I haven't seen a whole lot about that. I've seen just a little bit of reporting. I think at this point in time in that process, a lot of it is just kind of reading tea leaves and looking at kind of who might have that kind of scratch in order to purchase an NBA team. But as that process goes on, we'll probably find out more about it. One thing we do know, supposedly, Phil Knight has said he is not interested. But other than that, we'll have to wait and see. It sounds like the sale of the Boston Celtics is just about wrapped up, and so it's potential that groups that were maybe bidding for the Celtics, maybe now they turn their attention to Portland. There's not that many teams that come up for sale very often. They have shown to be great investments. And if you're someone who has the means, there are not a whole lot of NBA teams available. There are 30 that exist now, and there's assumptions about when the league might expand, but at best they'd probably add two more teams. So I would imagine there will be a lot of interesting bidders. But as of right now, I don't know who any of those people would be. So whoever you are, if you are considering purchasing the team, someone who's worked for the team for 18 years. It's a great organization. It's obviously a great fan base. You could do a whole lot worse than purchasing the Portland Trailblazers. And finally, the last time that we talked, I think we were still in the first round of the NBA playoffs. We're now in the finals of the NBA playoffs. Oklahoma City Thunder dispatching the Minnesota Timberwolves quite easily to move on to the finals for the Western Conference, whereas the Pacers able to handily beat the Knicks at this point to get their spots in the finals as well. So Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Indianapolis Pacers. Game one, Thursday, June 5th at 5:30. Congratulations to both those teams for getting there. Obviously, the Thunder won the Western Conference, however many games they won. So to see the Thunder make it there, not exactly a surprise. I think they're, to be frank, I think, a lot of people, myself included, kind of wondered if a team as young as the Thunder, who had never really kind of had that experience in the postseason, could make the finals. I think they showed throughout the process. They got better as the playoffs went on. They learned things as the playoffs went on. I think they had their toughest test, obviously, versus the Nuggets. And then when they got to the Western Conference Finals versus the Timberwolves, were able to apply those things and win that series rather handily. The gentleman sweep 4-1. And even the one game they won, I think they won by 40. But like that's a game too where it's like Oklahoma City was just like, we don't care about this game. Like, you go ahead, it's yours, take it. So like, I don't. I think it was even less than a gentleman's sweep. It was more like they won like half a game basically. Because again, I think the Thunder, they win the first two games in the series, or the first three games, excuse me, in the series, and they know at that point in time, like, we're going to win this thing. And then the Timberwolves come back and they get that, or excuse me, I think it was 2-1, or they won the first two. Either way, the one game the Timberwolves won didn't mean a whole lot. Like it didn't ever feel to me, didn't ever feel like the Timberwolves were going to win that series. Didn't really even feel to me like they were even all that competitive in that series, to be perfectly frank. And now we'll kind of see where they go. 2 years in a row now getting eliminated in the Western Conference Finals. They've got some contract guys coming up too. Naz Reid is awesome, and I don't know what he's going to get as a free agent, but it ain't going to be cheap because that guy should probably be starting somewhere. So the Thunder move on, and then you have the Pacers, who like no one would have. I mean, there might have been some places that said the Pacers would make the final. I'd be shocked if anyone had the Pacers making the finals at the beginning of the season, or even halfway through the season, or even going into the postseason. The East obviously had a lot of injuries. The Cavaliers flamed out with injuries. The Celtics looked like they were going to go down to the Knicks anyways, which I was a bit surprised by. And then, have Jason Tatum goes down, and that puts the kibosh on that. But I was a little surprised at kind of how much difficulty the Celtics had with the Knicks. The Celtics play that, they take a lot of threes, and if those shots aren't falling, it starts to get guys start to get a little nervous, and I think we kind of saw that in that series. But I was still a bit surprised at how little they were able to fight back versus the Knicks team that has talent, but not like crazy over the top talent. Jalen Brunson had a really good series, but so yeah, and then the Pacers and the Knicks move on. Pacers once again, I think just the better team, the deeper team, team that had more legs. The role players for the Pacers have been phenomenal. Rick Carlisle is a phenomenal coach with NBA championship experience. He's been there before. So to see them come out after the Celtics and the Cavs got bounced, that is not surprising. But for them to get there in the first place, I think is a bit surprising, and is a testament to the idea that you gotta, who's gonna say what happens in the postseason, and I feel like a lot of times, we kind of you go into a season, you're like, well, if we don't know X, Y, and Z, like we don't have any chance, so why even bother? Let's just try to get a good draft pick. And I think we're seeing more and more now that, and obviously, seven different teams winning the championship the last 7 years is good proof of that sometimes it's just about getting in and giving yourself a chance. And you're always going to have to get lucky. Teams, either that's with staying healthy or with your opponent not having luck in terms of injuries. So, you're always going to have some things fall your way, but you can't win a championship unless you make the playoffs. And So I guess what I'm saying is like there's no teams out there right now that are so much better than everyone else that you go into a season feeling like, well, if things don't break just right for us, we have no chance. Oklahoma City is obviously going to be great for a long time or a while at least until they have to start playing some of their role players. And then when they get to that second apron, those issues probably, being difficult. I think a lot of people view the Spurs and Wembanyama and when everyone starts to get to the spot there, they're going to be a problem for years and years. But with the old guard kind of aging out and kind of finishing off their careers, and without a kind of new team stepping into their place to be like we're the team, and I kind of thought the Celtics might be that team. Obviously, that did not end up being the case. I think it's a good reminder that like if you are in the postseason, if you give yourself a chance, if you have broad talent on your roster in today's NBA, you don't necessarily have to have the best player or the best two players in a series in order to make an NBA Finals. And so, you just have to have players get hot sometimes. I mean, I think Therese Halliburton is a very good player. He did get hot, though. I think Miles Turner, a very good player, did get hot. And then the Pacers role players, guys like Nebhard, guys like Shepherd, like those guys really, to TJ McConnell, those guys all played incredibly well. And now they are 4 games away from winning an NBA championship. I don't think they're going to win an NBA championship. I think they're going to lose in 5 games to the Thunder, but they are there. And so again, I just think it's a good reminder that after some years and years and years there where it was like, well, you're going to lose to the Warriors regardless of how good you are. You're going to lose to whatever team LeBron is on, no matter how good you are. That those days aren't with us anymore. It's a new day in the NBA, and there's new opportunities. And so with this new CBA, I know CJ McCollum has taken a lot of heat about kind of the difficulty of keeping teams together now, but I think it's shown great things for NBA parity. You just have to give yourself an opportunity, and maybe things are going to have to break right for you, but you have, I think, more of a chance now to win a championship as a smaller market team, or just as a team that maybe doesn't have the same top end talent as some other teams do, than you have in the last, I would say, probably 20 years in the NBA. And that's going to do it for this edition of The Briefcase. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, new additions as we have more workouts in Tualatin as Trailblazers prepare for the 2025 NBA Draft. As I mentioned, I expect there will be more workouts this week, and if not this week, then next week as well. We will have coverage from those on trailblazers.com, all of our social media accounts as well, on YouTube. Please check those out wherever you get your content. Please subscribe to The Briefcase and all of our Trailblazers podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Casey Holdahl. Talk to you soon. Go Blazers.